My name is Savannah Carter, and I'm 27 years old. I work as an HVAC technician. I got certified right out of high school, did my apprenticeship, kept my head down, learned the trade properly, and now I work for a solid company handling residential and commercial installs. I make about $68,000 a year, which where I live is perfectly respectable. I own my truck. I rent a decent one-bedroom apartment. I have a retirement account. I pay my bills on time. I'm not flashy, and I'm not struggling. I'm just a woman who works with her hands, comes home tired, showers off the dust, and eats dinner on the couch in work socks. That's my life. And honestly, I liked it. There is something clean about knowing exactly who you are. I never needed my life to look impressive from across the room. I only needed it to be real when I woke up inside it. I also played football in high school. Yes, actual football, quarterback. I was good too. Good enough that people still remember it if they grew up in my town. All conference 2 years. State semifinal my senior year. A couple of small schools sniffed around, but nothing serious. And I never cared enough to chase it. I knew I didn't want college debt. I knew I wanted a trade. I liked fixing things. I liked the satisfaction of walking away from a broken system, humming again, because my hands had touched it. So that chapter closed when I was 18. That's the part that matters. Closed. I didn't spend my 20s retelling the same stories in bars or keeping some shrine to myself in my living room. I had a few things in a box in my closet. My old jersey, a couple of game balls, a framed team photo from our semi-final run. Normal nostalgia. The kind of stuff that belongs to memory, not identity. Then I met Ethan. Ethan worked in digital marketing for a startup. Social media strategy, content planning, branding, engagement funnels, all that language that always sounded to me like someone had turned conversation into a spreadsheet. He was handsome in that clean, polished way some men are, careful hair, white sneakers that never seemed to collect dirt, phone always in his hand like it was an extra organ. When we first started dating, he liked that I was different. That was his word. Different. He told his friends I was grounded, said it with a smile, like it was a compliment. He liked that I wasn't another woman performing cleverness over cocktails. He said I felt real. He said I knew how to do things. Once, early on, he stood in my kitchen while I fixed a cabinet hinge and looked at me like I was magic. "I swear," he said, laughing softly, "you make competence look hot." At the time, that landed exactly where he meant it to. I thought he admired me, and maybe in the beginning he did. The shift was slow enough that I almost missed it. At first it was little things. We'd go to dinner with his friends. People in tech, marketing, branding, vague creative jobs that involved words like growth and visibility and synergy, and somebody would ask what I did. I'd say, "I'm an HVAC tech." And Ethan would jump in right after me. "She works in mechanical systems." Or, "She's in climate control engineering." The first couple times, I let it go. I thought maybe he was trying to make conversation easier. Maybe he thought people wouldn't understand the trade. Maybe I was being too literal. Then one night, one of his friends asked again, and before Ethan could translate me into something more presentable, I smiled and said, "I fix air conditioners." I said it plainly, because that is what I do. "And heaters," I added. "That's the gig." His friend laughed, not at me, just with surprise, and said, "That's actually awesome." But Ethan looked at me like I had dropped a wrench on a glass table. On the drive home, he stared out the windshield for a long time before saying, "You don't have to dumb it down like that." I remember turning my head slowly and looking at him, because those words did not belong in the same car with me. "I'm not dumbing it down," I said. "That's my job." He sighed, already irritated, already positioning himself as the reasonable one. "I know, Savannah. I'm just saying maybe frame it better around my circle." Frame it better. For his circle. Like my life needed better packaging to be worthy of being said out loud. I let the silence sit between us the rest of the drive, but something small and sharp lodged itself in me that night. Not because of the words alone, because of how casually he said them. Like it was obvious. Like any sensible person would understand that HVAC tech needed a nicer wrapper. After that, I started noticing more. He never directly told me he was embarrassed by me. Men like Ethan rarely say the ugliest thing in the ugliest way. They sand it down first. They make it sound practical, social, cosmetic. They smile while they do it. He'd correct little details when he talked about me to people. He'd reshape stories. If I mentioned an early morning call because a family's heating died overnight, he'd laugh and say, "Savannah basically rescues domestic infrastructure." That sounds harmless until you hear it enough times to realize someone is allergic to the plain truth of you. The football stuff started around month 9. He found the box in my closet one Saturday while looking for an extension cord. He pulled out the jersey and held it up with a grin. "Oh my God," he said, "you were like a football girl in high school." I laughed a little and told him the short version. Quarterback, state semifinal, long time ago. At first, he acted like it was charming. Then he started turning it into a joke. Not an affectionate joke, not the kind couples make when there's warmth underneath it. A performance. We'd be out with people, and if the conversation stalled, he'd smirk and say, "Careful what you say around Savannah. She peaked at 17 and still has the jersey to prove it." Then he'd laugh in that way people do when they want everyone else to join in. Sometimes he'd say, "Don't worry, guys. If dinner gets too intense, she might start giving us a halftime speech." Always light, always playful on the surface. Always in front of an audience. That was the part that started getting under my skin. Not just the joke itself, but the audience cue built into it. That subtle little pause after he said something mean, waiting for everyone else to confirm it was funny. I told him once privately that it bothered me. We were in his kitchen. I remember because he had one of those dim pendant lights that made everything look softer than it was. "I don't like when you do that," I said. He looked up from his phone. "Do what?" "Make me into a punchline." His face changed immediately. Not guilty, defensive. "Savannah, come on, I'm joking." "I know you're joking. I'm saying I don't like it." He leaned back against the counter and crossed his arms. "You're being sensitive." There it was, the easiest escape hatch in the world. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it hurt you, just, you're feeling wrong." I remember looking at him and having one of those tiny, private moments where your body understands something before your mind is ready to admit it. But I dropped it. Not because he was right, because I'm not someone who likes dragging the same truth behind me once I've already said it. So I filed it away. That's what I did with every little thing. Filed it away. Every time he polished my job title for strangers. Every time he flinched when I described my life too plainly. Every time he joked about high school football, like it was proof I had somehow become less impressive with age instead of more solid. Then 3 weeks ago, it all snapped into focus. I was at work in the middle of an install. Dirty crawl space, half my body twisted around ductwork, sweat cooling at the back of my neck because the weather had turned weird that week. My phone was in my truck, so I didn't see anything until lunch. When I finally checked it, I had 11 texts from friends. Not one or two, 11. All versions of the same thing. "Sav, have you seen this? Please tell me this isn't real. Are you okay? Call me." My stomach didn't drop dramatically. It just went still. That kind of stillness has become familiar to me in life. It is never a good sign. I opened TikTok. Ethan had posted a video on his personal account. He had around 8,000 followers. Not internet famous, but enough that strangers filled his comments. Enough that his posts reached beyond the people who actually knew him. The video showed him standing in my apartment, in my bedroom, holding up my old football jersey from the box in my closet. He was smirking with that polished, performative expression people use when they already know how they want to look in the edit. The trending audio underneath it was one of those "name your toxic trait" sounds. And the caption said, "Toxic trait, dating someone who peaked in high school." I watched it once, then again. Then I locked my phone and sat in my truck for what was probably 15 minutes, maybe more. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was just very, very still. Because in that moment, everything lined up so cleanly it almost made me nauseous. Every little correction, every polished rebrand of my job, every joke told in front of his friends, every time he acted like my life needed a better filter before it could be shown. It all condensed into one quiet truth. He was embarrassed by me. Not temporarily, not impulsively, not in some weird bad mood. Ashamed. And now he had taken something that belonged to me. Something private and harmless and old, and turned it into content for other people to laugh at. That was the part that made something inside me go cold. He had gone into my closet. He had taken my jersey. He had used my history like a prop, and he had smiled while doing it. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I didn't send some emotional paragraph explaining respect to a man who had already demonstrated he understood humiliation perfectly well when he was the one serving it. I opened the video again, and from my own account, I left one comment. Toxic trait. Dating someone you're embarrassed by. That was it. One sentence. Then I locked my phone, put it face down on the seat beside me, and went back to work. By the time I got off that evening, the comment had exploded. More likes than the video itself. People in the replies were writing things like, "Well, damn, he earned that," and this did not go the way you thought it would, and using her actual jersey is nasty work. He had already turned off comments by then, but it didn't matter. Screenshots were everywhere. Once something leaves your hands online, it stops belonging to you. Funny how people who live on the internet only remember that when it hurts them. He hadn't texted me. Not once. That silence told me almost as much as the video did. Maybe he was hoping I hadn't seen it. Maybe he was in damage control mode. Maybe he was waiting to figure out how to talk his way out of it. Didn't matter. I went inside my apartment, took off my boots, walked straight to the closet, and got to work. I pulled every piece of Ethan's stuff out of my place. His clothes, his hoodie from the back of my kitchen chair, his phone charger by the couch, a toiletry bag he kept in my bathroom, running shoes, a watch box, a framed picture he'd bought for my living room because he said my walls looked emotionally unfinished. I packed everything neatly into a large plastic storage tub from my hall closet. No broken items, no mess, no dramatic destruction. I wasn't interested in revenge theater. I was interested in removal. I didn't take it to his apartment because he had roommates and I didn't want a scene. I didn't want him performing heartbreak in a doorway. I didn't want his friends peeking over shoulders. I didn't want to hear him explain tone to me in front of witnesses. So I drove to his older sister's house. Her name is Lauren. She lives about 10 minutes from me. She has always been the calm one in that family, the one who speaks like she is allergic to nonsense. I put the tub on her porch, rang the doorbell, and started walking back to my truck. She opened the door just as I reached it. I saw her look down at the tub, then up at me through the windshield. A second later, my phone rang. I answered. "Savannah," she said carefully, "is this what I think it is?" "Yeah," I said. "It's Ethan's stuff. We're done." There was a pause. Then, "Is this about that TikTok?" I looked out through my windshield at nothing. "You saw it." She let out a breath. "Everyone saw it." That landed exactly where it should have. I said, "Tell him I'll drop off anything else I find, and I'd appreciate it if he mailed back my spare key." Another pause. Then Lauren said something I did not expect. "Honestly, fair enough." I blinked. Not because I needed validation, because hearing someone from his side of things say the truth out loud felt stranger than anger would have. She lowered her voice. "I told him not to post it." A tiny, bitter pulse moved through me. Of course someone had warned him. Of course he did it anyway. "I'll handle this end," she said. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry." I swallowed once. "Thanks." Then I hung up and drove home. I made a sandwich because I hadn't eaten enough all day. I sat on my couch. I stared at the wall for a while with the TV off and the apartment too quiet around me. My jersey was back in its box, but I could still see it in my head the way he had held it up, like it was some stupid little relic from a woman he thought he had outgrown. That image hurt more than I wanted to admit. Not because of football. Not because of high school. Because somebody I loved had looked at the plain, unpolished pieces of me and decided they would play better as a joke. I took a shower late that night and stood under the water longer than usual. There is something about hot water after humiliation that feels almost medicinal, like your body is trying to rinse off a version of the day your mind keeps replaying. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. Still no text from Ethan. Just more notifications, more screenshots, more people noticing the same thing I had finally let myself name. He wasn't proud of me. And somewhere between the jersey, the caption, and the silence, I realized I was done trying to make that easier to survive. So I turned off my phone, and I went to sleep knowing that by morning, the real mess would start. When I said the real mess started the next morning, I meant it. I woke up to my phone buzzing itself in circles on the nightstand. Texts from Ethan. Texts from numbers I knew belonged to his friends. One Instagram DM from his mother, which somehow felt more exhausting before I even opened it. The whole thing had taken on that ugly momentum public humiliation always seems to gather once too many people have seen it. Everyone suddenly becomes a witness. Everyone thinks they are entitled to context. Everyone chooses a side before breakfast. I lay there for a second, staring at the ceiling, feeling the heaviness of bad sleep still sitting in my body. Then I picked up my phone. Ethan's first text had come in at 10:47 the night before. "Are you seriously breaking up with me over a TikTok?" That was the first one. Not "I'm sorry," not "I messed up," not "can we talk?" Just disbelief that consequences had arrived. The next one, 11:02 p.m. It was a joke. You can't take a joke. That's the real red flag here. And then, at 11:15 p.m., the one that told me more than the rest of them combined. "You realize you embarrassed me, right? Your comment has more likes than the video. My followers think I'm a jerk now." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so painfully, perfectly consistent. That was the problem to him. Not the disrespect, not the fact that he had used something private of mine as a prop, not the months of contempt leading up to it. The problem was that I had answered once, publicly, and people had sided with me. He wasn't mourning the relationship. He was mourning the ratio. I didn't respond. I scrolled down and found the DM from his mother. It was long. Longer than it had any right to be. The kind of message somebody writes when they've already decided who is wrong and just want the satisfaction of hearing themselves justify it. The highlights were these. I was throwing away a good relationship over something playful. Ethan had always had a teasing sense of humor. Healthy couples don't abandon each other over one mistake. And my personal favorite, men aren't the only ones who need thicker skin. Women who can't handle a little teasing aren't ready for real relationships either. I read that twice, not because it needed analysis, because I was genuinely fascinated by how often cruelty gets renamed playfulness by the people least affected by it. Then I closed Instagram, set my phone down, got out of bed, and went to work. That was the thing about my job. Air handlers still fail, compressors still lock up, thermostats still die. People still need heat and cooling whether your personal life is on fire or not. And sometimes that is a gift. There is relief in a broken system that can actually be fixed. By mid-morning, one of the guys on my crew had clearly seen everything online. His name is Marcus, good mechanic, talks too much, means well. He kept glancing at me while we unloaded tools like he was waiting for me to bring it up first. Finally, around coffee break, he gave up pretending. So, he said carefully, that TikTok? I looked at him. Yeah, he winced. She really did that? He did. With your jersey? I nodded once. Marcus leaned back against the van and blew out a breath through his teeth. That's nasty. I didn't say anything. He shook his head. I'm serious, Savannah. My wife would have my stuff on the lawn before I got home if I pulled something like that. That image almost made me smile. Lauren got the tub instead, I said. He stared at me for half a second, then barked out a laugh. Damn, you even handled the breakup more professionally than he handled the relationship. That sat with me the rest of the morning. Not because I needed his approval, but because sometimes hearing the plain truth from somebody outside the drama helps. It reorients you, keeps you from getting slowly talked out of your own reality by people who benefit from your confusion. That evening, Ethan's best friend called me. Not texted. Called. Her name is Vanessa, and she has never liked me. The first month Ethan and I dated, she once said in front of me that he usually went for people who were a little more aligned with his trajectory. When I asked what that meant, she smiled and said, "Nothing rude, just more forward-facing." I said, "I face a lot of things, mostly furnaces." She didn't laugh. So when her name lit up my phone that evening, I almost let it ring out. But I answered because sometimes I'd rather hear the stupidity directly than imagine it. She didn't bother with hello. You need to understand the position you've put Ethan in. I closed my apartment door behind me and set my keys on the counter. Interesting opening. I'm serious, she snapped. That comment you left is spreading everywhere. People are screenshotting it. They're sending it around. He's getting DMs from strangers calling him shallow and fake. His engagement is dropping. People are unfollowing him. This is affecting his work. I stood there for a second, still in my work boots, one hand on the counter. Then I said very evenly, he used my personal property to mock me for content. She exhaled sharply, irritated that I had returned to the actual issue. It was a trend. It was my jersey. It was a joke. It was public. She lowered her voice into that fake calm people use when they want to sound reasonable without actually being fair. You could have talked to him privately. I laughed once, quietly. He could have mocked me privately. Silence. Then I said, he chose an audience. I gave him one sentence in the same venue. That's not the same thing. You're right, I said. His video was planned, filmed, edited, and posted. My comment took 4 seconds. She went quiet long enough for me to know she understood exactly what I meant. Then she said coldly, "You're being childish." "No," I said, "I'm being done." And I hung up. I made dinner after that, ate standing at the counter because I was too tired to sit down properly, checked my phone once, and saw that Ethan had texted again. "Can we please talk like adults?" That one almost impressed me with its audacity. As if adults don't understand that public humiliation changes the conversation. As if adulthood requires infinite access to the person you disrespected. As if boundaries become immature the second they inconvenience you. I still didn't answer. 2 days later, Ethan posted again. This one was different. The first video had that bright, smug energy social media rewards. The second one was crafted for sympathy. He was sitting on his bed in low light, no styled hair, no grin, no cleverness. Sad music underneath. eyes red enough to imply tears. Whether they were real or helped along didn't matter. The caption read, "When she ends a year and a half over a joke and won't even talk to you about a broken heart." I stared at it with a kind of tired disbelief that almost felt older than I was. No mention of the original video. No mention of my jersey. No mention of the caption he wrote. No mention of the months of little cuts that led there. Just grief, edited for maximum softness. For a little while, the comments split exactly the way he probably hoped they would. People who hadn't seen the first video rushed in with sympathy. They called me cold, said communication matters, said social media ruins relationships when people are too proud to apologize. But then people who had seen the original started arriving, and they brought screenshots. Screenshots of the first TikTok, screenshots of my comment, screenshots of his turned off comments. The replies shifted fast. "Leaving out the part where you posted her old jersey is insane. So you publicly embarrassed her, and now you want privacy? The missing context is doing a lot of work here." He turned the comments off within an hour, deleted the video, reposted it without comments enabled. That was the pattern now. Control the narrative, lose control of the audience, retreat, repost, refine. I didn't say anything publicly. I didn't make my own video. I didn't post a statement. I went to work. I bought groceries. I did laundry. I paid my electric bill. I let him spin alone. And maybe that was what frustrated him most. Because if I had screamed online, he could have pointed to that. If I had posted crying videos, he could have called me unstable. If I had dragged mutual friends into a public war, he could have claimed mutual damage. But I wasn't doing any of that. I was just absent. And absence is hard to argue with when you need the other person to help build your version of events. That Thursday, Lauren called me again. I was sitting in my truck outside a supply house waiting for an order when her name came up. "Hey," I said. She sounded tired. "I just wanted you to know I told Ethan to stop posting about this." I looked out through the windshield at a stack of boxed filters by the loading bay. "How'd that go?" A humorless little breath on the other end. "About how you'd expect." I didn't answer. She said, "He genuinely thinks if he controls the story online, he can fix what happened." I rested one hand on the steering wheel. "He can't fix it because there's nothing to fix." "I know," she said softly. "I just wanted you to hear that not everyone in this family thinks you're the villain." That meant more than I let show, because the ugliest part of being publicly disrespected is not always the disrespect itself. Sometimes it is how quickly people around it start treating truth like a negotiable detail. So hearing one person say plainly, "I see this clearly," felt steadier than comfort. "Thanks," I said. She paused. For what it's worth, I told him it wasn't funny before he posted it. I closed my eyes for half a second. There it was again. Confirmation. He had been warned. He had chosen humiliation anyway. "Got it," I said quietly. Then we hung up. Friday night, Ethan came to my apartment, unannounced. He knocked 3 times, then once more, lighter, like he was trying to sound softer than the first version of himself who had decided to show up without permission. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there with his shoulders slumped, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, face pale and drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept well. I opened the door because I figured dragging it out in the hallway would only make it worse. He looked at me with that wrecked expression people wear when reality has finally reached their front door. "Can we please talk?" he asked. I stepped aside once. "Fine." He came in slowly, like he was entering a museum of a life he no longer belonged to. He sat on the couch, looked around the room, not dramatically, just long enough for me to know he had noticed his things were truly gone. I stayed standing for a moment before sitting in the chair across from him. He rubbed both hands together, then looked up at me. "I know the TikTok was a bad idea," he said. "I should have asked before using your jersey." That wording landed exactly as badly as it deserved. Not "I should never have done that." Not "I degraded you." Not "I'm ashamed of how I treated you." Just "I should have asked before using your jersey." As though consent over the prop was the only issue. As though humiliation itself was negotiable if permission had been granted. I said nothing. He swallowed. "But you didn't have to humiliate me in front of thousands of people." I held his gaze. "You humiliated me first." He flinched a little, not outwardly dramatic, just enough to show the sentence hit where excuses usually protect people. "It was a trend," he said after a second. "Everyone was doing it. I don't care." "I didn't think," I cut in. "You didn't think I'd see it, or you didn't think I'd care?" That shut him up. He looked down at his hands, then away toward the kitchen, then back at me again. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "Both, I guess." For one strange second, the honesty almost made the room feel quieter. Because there it was, the whole thing stripped down. He hadn't thought I'd see it. He hadn't thought I'd care enough. He hadn't imagined I would answer. He had built the post around my silence. "I wanted to take down your comment," he said. I almost smiled. "I'm sure you did." "No, Savannah, seriously. My engagement is wrecked. I've lost almost 600 followers. A brand I was in talks with pulled back. This is affecting actual income." There it was again. Metrics, followers, deals, optics. I leaned back slowly in my chair and felt something inside me harden into its final shape. "You made the video," I said. "The consequences are from the video." My comment made it worse. "No," I said. My comment made sure there were two sides. He stared at me like he wanted me to be less calm, less certain, more available for negotiation. "So what?" he said. "You're just going to leave it there forever?" I shrugged once. "I'm going to leave it there until I stop caring, which is getting close." His jaw tightened. Then his whole face shifted, and the anger gave way to something more desperate. "Is there any chance," he said quietly, "that we can fix this?" I looked at him for a long moment. 1.5 years is not nothing. That matters. History matters. Routine matters. The shape a person leaves in your life matters. And he did look hurt. But hurt is not innocence. Regret is not repair. And sadness is not the same thing as respect. "No," I said. He blinked, like he had still been holding on to the possibility that showing up in person might bend me. "No? No. What if we tried counseling?" I almost laughed, but the sound that came out was too tired to be humor. "This isn't a communication problem, Ethan." He frowned. "Then what is it?" "It's a respect problem." He went still. I said it again, slower this time, because some truths deserve to be heard without room to misinterpret them. "You spent months polishing my job so your friends wouldn't hear it plainly. You made jokes about my past in front of people after I told you I hated it. Then you took something that belonged to me and used it online to make me look pathetic for strangers." He opened his mouth, but I kept going. "A therapist cannot fix the fact that you are ashamed of who I am." That one landed. I saw it in his face. Not because he agreed, because somewhere inside him, he recognized it. The room went very quiet after that. He looked down, nodded once, barely, then stood up without another argument. At the door, he stopped like he might say something important, something final, something that would reframe everything in a prettier light. What came out instead was small. "I didn't think it would go this far." I looked at him. "That's because you never thought about how it would feel from my side." He gave the tiniest nod, opened the door, and left. No slammed door, no dramatic exit, no last-minute speech. Just the sound of the latch catching, and then the apartment settling around the absence he left behind. I stood there for a while after he was gone. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just sad in that dull, clean way that comes after certainty. Because the worst part of endings like that is not the fight. It is the moment you understand that the person you loved has been standing in front of you the whole time, and you kept hoping they were someone else. I locked the door, turned off the hallway light, and for the first time since this started, I really believed it was over. I was wrong. For a few days after Ethan walked out of my apartment, everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, not the kind that feels like closure, the kind that feels like something is regrouping just out of sight. No texts from him, no new posts, no calls from Vanessa. Even his mother stopped sending messages like she was moderating a debate I had never agreed to participate in. I let myself believe, briefly, that maybe it was done. That people had seen enough. That the situation had burned itself out. That everyone was tired. I should have known better. The next Monday, I got a text from Jason, one of the guys I play pickup basketball with on Wednesdays. He's not dramatic, not the kind to insert himself into other people's situations, which is exactly why I paid attention when his name popped up. "Hey, you got a minute?" I called him. "Hey," I said. He hesitated for half a second, like he was deciding how direct to be. Then he just went for it. "I figured you'd want to know. Ethan's been telling people you were controlling." I leaned back against the side of my truck, staring out across the parking lot like the answer might be written somewhere on the asphalt. "Controlling how?" "He's saying you didn't like him posting on social media," Jason said. "That you'd get weird about it. That you tried to limit who he hung out with. Stuff like that." I let out a slow breath through my nose. There it was. Phase 2. When it was just a joke stops working, you pivot to, she was the problem the whole time. Classic. I asked, "Do you believe that?" Jason didn't hesitate. "No. That one word did more for me than a whole speech would have." He went on, "Sav, I've seen you two together a bunch of times. You never once told him what to post. Half the time you didn't even know what he was posting. And you literally drove him and his friends to that concert when their Uber bailed. That's not controlling." A small, tired smile pulled at my mouth. "Appreciate that." "Just thought you should know," he said. "People are starting to hear it." "I figured they would," I said. We hung up after that. I stood there for a minute longer than I needed to, keys still in my hand, letting the information settle without letting it sink too deep. Because this was the part where people make mistakes. This is where you feel the urge to correct everything loudly, to defend yourself, to call people, to post something that sets the record straight. But I know how stories work once they leave your mouth. The louder you try to control them, the more you confirm that there's something to control. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to do anything. And I mean that very specifically. Not passive nothing. Not helpless nothing. Strategic nothing. Over the next few days, I started noticing the small shifts. Not big confrontations. No one came up to me accusing me of anything. It was subtler than that. A couple of mutual acquaintances who used to like my Instagram posts stopped. A woman I'd always gotten along with in our extended friend group posted a story about a restaurant. I replied with a simple, "That place is great. Get the pasta," and she left me on red. At the gym, one guy who usually nodded at me kept his eyes on his phone when I walked in. Nothing dramatic, just distance. The kind that creeps in when someone has been talked about in rooms they weren't in. I felt it. Of course I did. I'm not made of stone. But I also understood something that I don't think Ethan expected me to understand. Narratives need reinforcement. They need energy. They need reaction. So I gave it none. Wednesday, I went to pick up basketball like I always do. Same time, same court, same guys. I played like I always play. Focused, a little competitive, talking just enough trash to keep it fun. I didn't bring up Ethan. I didn't reference the TikTok. I didn't explain anything. After the game, we sat on the bench drinking water and talking about nothing important. At one point, Jason made a joke about my jumper being more reliable than his car, and I shot back that his car at least didn't brick under pressure. Normal, easy, unbothered. And people noticed that. Not immediately, but they file it away. Sunday, I went to Marcus's place to watch football. Same couch, same cheap beer, same arguments about plays, like we all secretly think we're better coaches than the people getting paid millions. At one point, someone mentioned social media drama in general, nothing specific, and Marcus just shook his head and said, "Some people really don't know when to leave well enough alone." I didn't react, didn't ask what he meant, didn't take the bait, because if he was talking about Ethan, I didn't need to confirm it. And if he wasn't, I didn't need to create it. The following week, I showed up to a mutual friend's birthday dinner. Ethan wasn't there. I didn't ask why. I sat at the table, ordered food, laughed at the same dumb jokes I always laugh at, told a story about a job where a customer's thermostat had been set to off for 2 days, and they thought the whole system was broken. People laughed. Not at me. With me. Again, normal. That's what I gave everyone. Consistency. And slowly, almost invisibly, something started to shift. Because the version of me Ethan was describing, the controlling, restrictive, insecure woman who couldn't handle his career, didn't line up with the woman people were sitting across from. Controlling people don't show up alone to group events and act relaxed. Controlling people don't let things go quiet. Controlling people don't disappear from conflict and just live. They tighten. They push. They demand. I was doing none of that. And people are not stupid. They might be influenced for a moment, but eventually they compare. The story they heard versus the person in front of them. And when those two things don't match, the story starts to fall apart on its own. Jason told me about a week later that the same woman who had left me on red had asked him casually, "Was Savannah actually controlling? Because that doesn't sound right." He told her the truth. The next day, she replied to one of my messages like nothing had ever happened. I didn't bring it up. No point. Because this was never about winning an argument. It was about letting the truth have enough space to stand on its own. And it was working. Not dramatically. Not in some satisfying cinematic way, where everyone suddenly apologizes and admits they were wrong. Real life doesn't do that. It was quieter. People just recalibrated. They stopped repeating what Ethan said. They stopped looking at me sideways. They started interacting with me the way they always had. And the version of me he was trying to build slowly lost its shape. Here's the part I think frustrated him the most. I didn't confront him about the rumors. I didn't text him saying, "I know what you're telling people." I didn't ask him to stop, because I didn't need him to stop. The story he was telling required me to react, to get angry, to defend myself, to become the exact kind of person he was describing. And I refused to give him that. So instead, I just kept showing up, kept working, kept playing basketball, kept going to dinners, kept being exactly who I had always been. And that consistency did more damage to his narrative than any speech I could have made. About 10 days after the breakup, Lauren called me again. I was sitting in my truck outside a gas station, halfway through a burrito I had grabbed, because the job ran long and I hadn't packed lunch. "Hey," I said, Her voice was different this time, not just tired. Careful. I need to tell you something, she said, and I'm not sure it's my place, but I think you should know. I swallowed the last bite and set the wrapper aside. Okay. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, the TikTok wasn't just a one-off. Something in my chest went still. What do you mean? I mean, she said slowly, Ethan didn't just post that on a whim. He had a plan. I didn't say anything, because I had a feeling I already knew where this was going, and I didn't want to rush it. She continued, I went over to his place a few days ago to check on him. He left his laptop open on the table, and I saw a spreadsheet. A cold, quiet pressure started building behind my ribs. A spreadsheet? I repeated. Yeah, she said. A content calendar. That word landed like something physical. Content calendar. I stared out through my windshield at nothing, my reflection faint in the glass. What kind of content? I asked, even though part of me didn't want the answer. Lauren exhaled slowly. The kind that uses you. The burrito sat untouched in my hand. I didn't move, didn't speak, because something much heavier than anger was starting to take shape, and I needed a second to understand it. What was in it? I asked finally. Another pause. Then Lauren said very quietly, the Jersey video was just the first one. And that was the moment I realized this story wasn't over yet. Not even close. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there in my truck, engine idling, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other still loosely holding the foil-wrapped burrito that had gone cold without me noticing. The first one, I repeated finally. Lauren didn't rush to fill the silence. She let the weight of that sit exactly where it landed. Yeah, she said. There were more. My throat felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with anger. What kind of more? I heard her shift on the other end, like she was choosing her words carefully. It was a spreadsheet. Dates, draft captions, hashtags, engagement notes, like a posting schedule. A content calendar. For me, not us, not his life. Me. I closed my eyes for a second. Tell me, I said. There was a pause, not hesitation, respect. Then she did. There was one about your truck, she said. Something like, when your girlfriend thinks her work truck is a personality trait. I let out a slow breath through my nose. Of course there was. Another about your job, she continued. I don't remember the exact wording, but it was basically making it sound like your career peaked at fixing other people's thermostats. I stared straight ahead, jaw tightening. And one about how you eat, she added quietly. Something about you putting hot sauce on everything like a kid. A series. Not a mistake. Not a joke that went too far. A plan. A sequence of posts, each one taking a piece of me, my truck, my job, my habits, and turning it into something small enough for strangers to laugh at. Scheduled. Drafted. Optimized. I didn't realize I had stopped breathing until I had to force air back into my lungs. She had it all mapped out? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Yeah, Lauren said. Dates, captions, timing, everything. The Jersey video was labeled as the first post in the series. Episode 1. I leaned my head back against the seat and stared at the ceiling of my truck. For a moment, everything else faded. The TikTok, the comments, the breakup, the rumors. All of it. Because this was different. The original video had been cruel. The rumors had been predictable. But this meant that every time Ethan had looked at me, there had been a second layer behind it. A quiet calculation. Every time I grabbed my keys. Every time I mentioned a job. Every time I reached for the hot sauce without thinking. Some part of his mind had been asking, is this usable? I wasn't a partner. I was material. And somehow that hurt more than everything else combined. Lauren's voice softened. I'm telling you this because I think you deserve to know. It wasn't just a bad decision. It was intentional. I swallowed once. Yeah, I said, I get that. I'm sorry, she added. It's not your fault. I know, she said. It just feels wrong not to say it. We sat in silence for a second. Then I said, thank you for telling me. Of course. We hung up. I didn't start the truck. Didn't move. I just sat there and let the information settle into something solid. Because once something like that becomes real, you can't push it back into something smaller. You can't reframe it. You can't soften it. You can only decide what to do with it. And I thought about that for a long time. What I could do. What I should do. What would feel satisfying in the moment versus what would actually matter later. There were options. I could post about it. Expose the spreadsheet. Call him out publicly. Let the internet do what the internet does when it smells something ugly. And for a second, just a second, that option tempted me. Because it would have been easy. One post, one explanation. And suddenly, the entire narrative would flip overnight. But then I thought about something simpler. I thought about the fact that I had already ended it. I had already walked away. I had already made it clear, without noise, that I was not staying in something that required me to shrink to be tolerated. And I realized I didn't need to win. I just needed to stay consistent. So I did what I had been doing from the beginning. Nothing public, nothing loud, nothing reactive. But I did make one small adjustment. I called 3 people: Jason, Marcus, and one other close friend from the group who I trusted to hear something without turning it into a performance. I told each of them the same thing. Calmly, clearly. There was a spreadsheet, a content calendar. The Jersey video wasn't a one-off. It was episode 1. I didn't show proof. I didn't ask them to spread it. I didn't tell them what to think. I just said, I thought you should know. And then I let it go. Because information like that doesn't stay contained. Not when it feels that wrong. Not when it makes people look at someone they thought they knew and realize there was something else underneath. Within a week, it had moved through the entire friend group. Not in some loud, messy explosion. In quiet conversations. In side comments. In that tone people use when they're trying to make sense of something that doesn't sit right. Did you hear about the spreadsheet? Apparently it was planned. Like, planned. And just like that, the ground shifted. The people who had been defending Ethan started going quiet. 2 of his closer friends, the ones who had been most vocal about him being misunderstood, stopped posting with him altogether. One of them, from what I heard through Jason, confronted him directly. Asked him if it was true. Asked him if he had actually been planning a series of posts about me. His response? It's not that deep. Everyone does it. That was the moment the conversation ended. Because there are certain sentences that don't defend you. They expose you. And that was one of them. The thing about strategies is they work best when nobody sees them. The moment people understand that something was calculated, it stops feeling relatable. It starts feeling manipulative. Ethan had been trying to build an audience by turning our relationship into content. Instead, he turned himself into a cautionary example. His follower count didn't crash overnight. It wasn't dramatic like that. It was slower, steady. A few people leaving here, a few more there. Enough that it became noticeable. The brand deal he mentioned? Gone. And not because of my comment. Because the entire situation had attached itself to his name. Not as engagement. As a warning. I didn't track it. Didn't check his page. Didn't go looking for updates. I heard things secondhand sometimes. Marcus mentioning something he'd seen, Jason relaying something someone said. But I usually changed the subject. Because I wasn't interested in watching him fall. I was interested in moving forward. It's been about 3 weeks now. I'm sitting in my truck again, parked outside a job site, eating another gas station burrito because I still haven't learned how to pack lunch consistently. It's cold out, the kind of cold that seeps into your hands if the heat isn't working. But my heater works perfectly. Funny how that is. The job he thought was a punchline is the same one keeping me warm. My jersey is back in its box in my closet. I thought about getting rid of it. Not because I'm ashamed of it. Because now, when I think about it, I see that video. Him holding it up. That smirk. That moment. But I'm not throwing it away. Because that jersey isn't his memory. It's mine. It's from a season where I gave everything I had. Where I showed up, worked hard, and it mattered. And I'm not letting someone else's disrespect rewrite my relationship with my own past. The friend group? Mostly intact. The people who matter stayed. A few drifted toward him. That's fine. Not everyone is meant to stay in your life after something shifts. The core, the people who actually know me, they're still here. That's enough. Lauren texted me last week. Just a simple message. Hope you're doing okay. I replied, I am. She said, good. You deserve better than that. I looked at that for a second before typing back, I know. And I meant it. I don't have some dramatic victory speech to end this with. I didn't destroy him. I didn't go on a campaign. I left one comment on one video, packed his things into a clean container, told a few people the truth. That's it. Everything else? That was gravity. He built something unstable, and it collapsed. That's not revenge. That's just how things fall when there's nothing solid underneath them. The only thing that still sits with me sometimes, the only part I don't say out loud, is the spreadsheet. Because that means every time he looked at me, he wasn't just seeing me. He was cataloging, sorting, saving, deciding what parts of me would get the most reaction. And that does something to your brain. It makes you wonder how long you were a joke without knowing it. But here's what I know now. I'm good at what I do. I make an honest living. My truck is paid off. My hands know how to fix things. And the people who matter in my life answer when I call. And I have a jersey in my closet from a time in my life when I showed up fully, and it was enough. That's not peaking. That's living. And I'm not apologizing for it. Go be with someone who's proud of you. Life's too short to be somebody's content.